In today's video, I have an interesting little theory for you about Arya and her role in Cleganebowl. Believe it or not, Arya has actually had a front row ticket to both rounds of Cleganebowl, and she has not attended either one. Now, Arya and Sandor, of course, have a relationship that builds throughout the series, and in the end, it leads to them coming together to fight at Winterfell in the television show. And once the world is saved, the two of them turn their eyes south, where Sandor needs to deal with his brother once and for all. Arya goes with, seemingly to help him out, and they travel for what must be weeks together, and apparently never have this conversation about how, this is a terrible revenge cycle, and maybe this is self-destructive, right up until the very end, so that they can have Arya in the Red Keep itself, but then she's not actually fighting Gregor, because that would have been fruitless anyway, because of course you can't kill him. We see Sandor stab him a bunch of times. There's nothing Arya could have done in that fight that could have helped. That being said, it was a little weird, and I think a lot of people thought it was a little weird, that she went all the way down there, got into the Red Keep, was going up there fully ready to go, right up until they had that little conversation and then fully changed her mind. It seemed a bit odd. I mean, you could say maybe she just wanted to be with Sandor right up until the end for as long as she could, and now she knew it was time and it was the time to go. That's kind of how I headcanoned it away to make it make a little bit more sense. But if you take what we've been talking about on the channel recently into account as something that the television show seems to have left out, well, actually, there's something that Arya maybe could have done to help, and that's a very interesting little situation that George may be setting up. If you have seen my recent videos, you will know that I believe the mountain may be being kept alive with a glass candle, and if you have not seen them, in one of the unused versions of the A Feast for Crows prologue known as the long version, which was found by G-Steph in the Cushing Library, George R. R. Martin suggested that glass candles were once used to make men immortal. Anyone who could be bound to the glass candle could not die so long as the flame stayed lit. Now, we have spent the last few videos on the channel doing a little sort of mini-series on the possible implications on the story of this power of glass candles if this is something that George actually decides to stick with when he publishes The Winds of Winter. It really does sound a lot like exactly what we see going on with our boy, the Mountain, and it sort of seems a lot like what we see going on with Melisandre as well. Heck, it might even be the thing that was shoved into the chest of that guy who was strapped to the tree when the Night's King was made in the television show. So glass candles could actually be pretty important if they can grant immortality, because one of the whole big themes of this book is mortality and acceptance of mortality. All men must die. It's why Arya is off at the House of the Black and White in the first place. It's why she's off in a different continent, learning about death, learning about how all men must die. And one of the things that she is taught by the Faceless Men is that they had to give the gift of death to the slaves in Valyria because they were begging for it and praying for it. And as it was very correctly pointed out at one point in my comments section, it would have been very easy to die as a slave down in the volcanic fiery mines of Valyria. So there's no real reason for them to need to pray for the gift of death from some strange assassin when it would be so easy to die. But what if these people were in fact also bound to glass candles? It's another potential use of immortal slave labor that we see that would resemble or mirror what we have speculated is going on within the wall. It would also mean that the Faceless Men are directly experts at putting out glass candles and taking out people who have been bound to immortality by glass candles. And that really does kind of make a lot of sense, doesn't it? Because all men must die does not seem like a thing you need to remind people of in a world where immortality like this doesn't exist. But if you have people in the Valyrian freehold, sorcerers binding themselves to immortality, suddenly reminding people all men must die becomes a little bit more important and makes a little bit more sense as like a catchphrase, and that really seems like the catchphrase of some people who go around putting out glass candles. So basically, in the Winds of Winter, be on the lookout for Arya to get some sort of lesson about glass candles, some sort of lesson about putting out glass candles, because I really do think that that could end up being very important for her story. So tying things now back into the original topic of the video, which is, of course, Cleganebowl. Well, if the mountain is bound to a glass candle, that really does seem to mirror exactly what we saw with his fight in the television show with Sandor. No matter how many times you stab him, he's not going to die. No matter what you do to him, he's not going to die. So suddenly when you realize that the television show was saying how they wanted to tone down on the sort of magic side of things, you could sort of see a scenario where maybe they just didn't show us the glass candles in any context, right? In any of these situations where they may end up being used in the books, glass candles were just removed, and we got some ambiguous magic left in its place, and that's what we see with Melisandre, that's what we see with the mountain, that's potentially why there's no explanation as to how the others were made. All of this is seeming to line up into a scenario that all fits together, right? So we could have gotten a scenario where they were following the beats of the story, but they left out things that were too magical in their eyes, like the glass candles. But here is something that is interesting that did come from the television show. In Season 1, when Ned and Sansa are watching the jousts, when Ser Gregor rides through the lists, he opens his helmet, which in the books, the zombie mountain is first foreshadowed by Bran having a vision or a dream of a giant armored in stone who, when he opens his visor, there's nothing inside but thick black blood. So when Ser Gregor, in Season 1, when they really still cared about this foreshadowing and when George was heavily involved and when it was all big book fans paying homage to these books, well, back then, it really does seem like they had a lot more foreshadowing, a lot more little hints at things yet to come being potentially set up. So when Ser Gregor rides down the lists, he turns, he opens his visor, showing his face. What exactly happens next? Ned turns to Sansa and says, "Where's Arya?" When Ser Gregor opens his visor, Ned says, "Where's Arya?" And Sansa says, "At her dancing lessons." Now, in the books, it's the exact same situation. He doesn't specifically say, "Where's Arya?" But she doesn't go and see the joust where Cleganebowl happens because she is at her dancing lessons with Syrio Forel. They find her, they find she's all covered in bruises, and Sansa thinks how bad she must be at dancing because Sansa doesn't know what's actually going on yet. But she misses the whole hands tournament, she misses Cleganebowl round 1 in the show and in the books, because she is messing around, learning cool tricks from the Braavosi guy, and running through the bowels of the Red Keep, chasing cats and getting bruises. So let me paint a picture for you of how I see this all playing out in the books. For those of you who only watched the show, there was actually some, sort of debate, I guess you could say, within the books of, is Cleganebowl gonna happen? Gregor is obviously Sir Robert Strong. Sandor is very likely the Gravedigger. I would say obviously the Gravedigger. Some people debated that he wasn't, and some people debated that even if he was, he has found peace. He's off digging graves. That's where he's gonna stay forever. There's no way that George would write him that perfect, beautiful ending just to bring him back. But it's what? Of course he would. That's the whole point of keeping him alive. How is he ever going to be at peace when he's got the guy who has tormented him for his entire life out there being undead, unkillable, tormenting people, and he's going to be sitting there feeling like he might be the only one who has a chance to actually take this guy out, and he's going to feel obligated to go and try. So a bunch of people were saying they didn't want Cleganebowl to happen, they thought it was fan service, or they thought it was made up for the television show just to make people happy. I think that's really silly. I don't know why anyone wouldn't want Cleganebowl to happen. I think that that's way better than any other alternative for the story for these characters, but that's just me. So yeah, in my opinion, Cleganebowl is happening, get hype. But there are a few different scenarios for how it could play out, so pick your favorite Cleganebowl scenario headcanon and just insert it into here. I will give you mine currently. I personally like to imagine the scenario where Sandor is fighting his brother in a trial by combat for the innocence or guilt of Cersei, with Sandor representing the faith and Gregor representing Cersei. That seems to be fairly well set up, and it seems like it would give an interesting and almost a good peaceful resolution to the character arc if Sandor was indeed able to win that fight. Or, at least kill Gregor and then die in the process, so that they're both sort of at peace, and he knows, he gets to see at least that his brother has been taken out before he goes. I think that's kind of what Sandor really wants to be at peace, is to know, hey, this dangerous thing that's in the world, it's kind of my responsibility to take it out before I go. I think that's kind of what he wants to do, right? He doesn't want to leave this guy around to hurt more people after he's gone, because he knows he might be one of the few people who can actually take him out. I think that could kind of be his motivation going into this whole scenario. But, of course, based on what we have talked about already in the video, you can see some issues with him winning this fight. And we saw those issues in the television show as well. If Gregor is bound to a glass candle, it's not going to matter how many times Sandor stabs him, he's just not going to die. And imagine this scene playing out in front of the common folk, in front of gods and men, in front of everyone in King's Landing at the Queen's trial by combat, where the champion of the faith is just stabbing the Queen's champion over and over again, should be mortally wounding him, should be killing him, but he just keeps going as if nothing is happening. If these people believe that trial by combats are divinely inspired to grant guilt or innocence, that's going to be a pretty strong case being made for Cersei in front of the eyes of gods and men if her champion refuses to die. So I kind of imagine it going this way in the books. Imagine a chapter from Cersei's POV preparing for her trial by combat, and you get the lead up where Qyburn assures her that her champion cannot be killed in this trial by combat because of what he has got hidden away down in the Red Keep that binds him to life. George could drop a little bit of the information that we'll need. I'm sure he'll have dropped a little bit about glass candles and how they work when Arya has to learn to put them out in the House of the Black and White, if this all is in fact what's going to come to pass, of course. So we as readers may already know how glass candles work at least a little bit, and then we will find out, to our horror, just before the trial where Sandor is going to have to fight his brother, that Gregor can't die because he's bound to a glass candle, which is hidden deep below the Red Keep. And we get this chapter in Cersei's point of view, leading all the way up into the middle of the fight, where Sandor is stabbing Gregor over and over repeatedly, and Cersei is getting very, very satisfied with the fact that she is going to win her trial. Now, again, I'm just making stuff up here, but then I would cut the chapter and go to an Arya chapter. That is her at the beginning, that is running concurrently with this Cersei chapter, and at the beginning she is using her Faceless Men power to disguise herself and sneak into King's Landing the day of the Queen's trial. Just around the time the trial is starting, as everyone is piling into the Dragon Pit or into wherever, the Sept of Baelor, wherever they hold these trial by combats, Arya herself is making her way to the Red Keep. She has just gotten to the Red Keep, and she is using her powers to disguise herself once again to get her way inside the Red Keep and get her way down to the bowels of the Red Keep. And suddenly, you have a very interesting and very tense scenario lined up here. You have Arya, who is the only person potentially in the world who has the knowledge and skill to navigate the Red Keep's bowels and find this glass candle and put it out, therefore killing Gregor and Cersei, taking 2 names off of her list, all in one big putting out of a candle. You really can't overstate how much in Arya's storyline is preparing her for a situation exactly like this. Her hatred of Cersei in the mountain, her love of Sandor, the fact that in the show we literally see her go with Sandor to this event, being at the place she would need to be, and then she has nothing to do because they cut this part of the magic from the television show. The fact that she has learned to navigate blind, the fact that she has already chased cats through the bowels of the Red Keep, down in the exact tunnels where we know the Master of Whisperers likes to walk and think he is secret, because she overheard Varys and Illyrio talking when she was all the way down in the tunnels, so she gets far enough down where it's normally where the Master of Whispers operates in secret, and that's exactly where she would need to go in the darkness if she was going to find this hidden glass candle and put it out in the middle of Cleganebowl, allowing Sandor to get a shocking come-from-behind victory. The other thing that is set up really well and would be awesome about this is if we get down there, we have this whole Arya chapter where she's navigating her way blindly through the Red Keep tunnels, trying desperately to put out this glass candle before it's too late, and she puts it out, and she doesn't know if it's in time enough or not, and neither do we, and then we get another Cersei chapter where it cuts back to the fight between Sandor and Gregor. Then, all of the sudden, you could have the beautiful setup that would be the exact mirror of the Mountain and the Viper fight. Instead of the Mountain being the one who is wounded, laying on the ground, on the verge of death, taking hit after hit, the trial by combat appears to be won, it would be the Mountain who is unkillable. Both sides have been taking wounds, both sides are being brutally beaten down, but none of it is affecting the Mountain because of his glass candle bond, because of the strange condition he's in. So Sandor is the one who is laying on the ground like the Mountain was, and the undead zombie Mountain is standing over him like Oberyn, ready to deliver the killing blow, and instead of Sandor grabbing his foot, Arya puts out his glass candle, and he collapses there, leaving Sandor, the last one alive, and condemning Cersei to death. So where was Arya in the first Cleganebowl when Ned asked Sansa? Well, she was at her dancing lessons, in the bowels of the Red Keep, running around in the tunnels, learning lessons from the cool Bravosi guy. And where will Arya be at the second round of Cleganebowl? In the bowels of the Red Keep, running around, putting to use the lessons she learned from the cool Bravosi guys. She will mirror the situation and bring it full circle by being down in the exact same place, using the things that she has learned to put out Gregor's glass candle and take out two of the names on her list. So, Ned, to answer your question, that is where Arya is at Cleganebowl. She is down in the Red Keep doing all sorts of cool shenanigans, and that is where she will be at Cleganebowl Round 2, down there in the bowels of the Red Keep, putting all of the shenanigans that she has learned to very good use, doing something that absolutely no one else in the story would be capable or qualified to do in seeking out and destroying that glass candle that binds the Mountain to life. I also do think it's worth just mentioning really quickly here as well, in addition to having already explored deep down in the tunnels below the Red Keep while she was chasing cats, while she was in Braavos, Arya has been learning to warg cats. I believe she wargs into a cat, at least briefly, while she is blind. Perhaps it is being blind that awakens this ability in her. But in any case, we have a situation where if someone needs to find something that is hidden deep down in the darkness of the Red Keep, well, what is there a lot of at the Red Keep running around in the tunnels? There is a bunch of cats. So if you could see through the eyes of a cat, perhaps that would also be a very useful thing if you need to quickly find something deep down below the Red Keep. So once again, just all of the skill sets make Arya absolutely perfect for this job. So what do you think of that theory? Do you have room in your heart for hype for Cleganebowl, even if you didn't like it in the show, how it played out, even if you didn't think it was going to happen in the books? Do you think if it played out in this fashion, it would be acceptable or cool? And if you were already in favor of Cleganebowl, what do you think of this style of how it would play out? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you all with something else very soon.